Hello and welcome to Greenleaf Workshop. What I'm going to be taking a look at in this video is how to roll an edge. A safety edge like this is used where the armour might be rubbing against a person, might be interacting with other plates, you don't want to damage one another, or you just need a reinforcement to tidy up the end. It's the parent really of all of the other sorts of edges that exist. The triangle edge, square and roped edges all come from an understanding of how to turn the piece of material through 180 degrees back onto itself in a neat way. On medieval armour, the safety edge is found principally on the vambraces round by the wrists, perhaps up the top here on the rack plate. You tend to get slightly more complicated ones, the triangular ribs and so on the tops of the legs, and you might find it down the sides on the rack plates on the side here. Principally on the greave. I've got a greave here that I've roughed out for a customer, and we've already turned the safety edge on it. You can see where I've cleaned just underneath to save a bit of time later trying to dig that out. What we're going to look at is how to turn this edge now, how to do it tidily, and what to do if it goes a bit wrong, which it can do from time to time. Here's a close-up of the greave that I showed you earlier. You can see the safety edges here. What it does is it creates a double thickness of material at the top, prevents chafing on the person whilst they're wearing it, and also gives it a bit more strength. This is the sort of edge we're going to be looking at in this video. What I will be using throughout this video is a piece of 16 gauge mild steel. So this is 1.6mm material. It'll move relatively easily, it'll be easy to see what's going on, and we won't need any heat. We'll save the heated versions for later for the triangles, squares and roped edges, and perhaps we'll use a piece of high carbon material on those as well, just to show it can be done whatever the material and with or without heat. The first thing to do with any rolled edge is to mark the size that you require. These are normally about 4 or 5mm down, not much more than that, if ever really anything along that sort of size. You tend to find that the rolled edges can be a bit large on a lot of reproduction armour. When you look at a lot of originals, they're quite dainty by comparison. Now you can use a tool like this as a divider. This enables you to set the width that you require and repeat it consistently throughout. And you just take the edge and scribe it along the material so you can see where you need to go. Another thing to do, and a lot simpler, is just to take a pen, but it does mean you need to be able to judge by eye whether you're the same each time, and you just run that along the top edge like so you can see where it is you want to put in your safety edge. Once you've got your edge marked, the next thing you need to do is find a nice straight edge. Obviously I've got this nice anvil here, but anything will do. I picked this one up from a scrapyard for about £10, and it's got a nice clean edge there. Even if that was a bit damaged, you can fill it with some weld or just grind it back by hand. Anything with a flat edge will do. You don't want it too sharp because you might cut the material, so if needs be, sometimes you can just round them off ever so slightly. So we have our previously marked piece of material and a hammer. Now this hammer can look a little specialist. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It can be any sort of hammer that just has a good flat edge to it on the front. I just prefer this hammer when I'm working on edges like this. And then I smooth them off with the one you saw. Now what you've got to do now is just offer that up to the edge, nice and gently there, just ever so slightly with your line past where you are. And just strike the ends. Make sure the ends are down, and then gently work your way across in smooth motions. Again, just another set of smooth passes. Nothing to it, almost at 90 degrees. I like to take them over to 90 and then just smooth them along the face, the wall of the anvil. And just tidy the top up a bit. You can see that's along our line that we marked previously. Now just turn it over. And you can put the edge into your hip or hold it here with your thumb against the anvil and just keep it nice in, about ½ an inch, ¼ of an inch away, and tap it over. And again, If you do start to come onto your anvil, that's not a problem, and actually you need to about this time. What's important is not to work in the middle of your anvil face. If you work here and you strike, particularly with a bigger hammer, you can start to mar the surface of your anvil and lose the ability to planish on it later. So always just take it close to the edge, so if you do miss strike, you're not actually hitting the face of your anvil. You start to work it over. What can happen is you start to walk your way off the edge and you end up smaller at this end. So always be sure to keep those edges over first and then just work your way along again in smooth, even motions. And then once you're happy that it's just about there, almost where you want it to be, start to work it straight down onto the anvil. And we're just about there. What I tend to like to do now is get that larger hammer you saw earlier and just tidy up the edge. It's easier to planish out those marks. Smooth, gentle strikes. The hammer is falling under its own weight. You don't want to overwork it and cause the material to splurge out in certain bits or be damaged or cracked or even thin it too far. Now I can work straight on the anvil face because I'm just coming straight down. And there is a basic safety edge. Rolled over nicely, relatively smart. Camera catches it. Good enough for anybody's armour there, without a doubt. If you look at some original pieces of armour, you will see that the edges on them are actually quite rough, perhaps rougher than we'd like today, with any shadow of a doubt. They seem to have a slightly different aesthetic to what the armour was, whereas we expect things to be in a sort of post-industrial age to be absolutely precise, whereas they seem to have a certain amount of discretion on what was considered good or not. So I'll give this a quick polish and then we'll take a look at the finished product and see where we're at. So here's our finished safety edge. I've given it a quick buff back there with an 80 grit. You don't have to be that aggressive. A 120 will do. I was just in a bit of a rush, and you just take it back so it's smoothed out. I've left the rusted surface on the other bit just to help us be able to see exactly what we've done there. So there is a basic rolled safety edge. What I'll do now is I'll curve the parent piece of material so that we can see how you put them in to perhaps the back of a greave or a vambrace or something along those lines. So I've cut the old safety edge off that we saw previously, and I've just turned the end of this into a bit of a curve so you can see what it would be like again if we were doing something like the safety edge on the back of this greave. The process is still exactly the same. Be sure to mark the inside edge of where you're going. So we'll just put in a 4mm or so edge along there. So that we're happy we can see where we're going. And then we'll go to the anvil face and we'll repeat the process. So we are at the anvil once again. This is the hammer I used previously to make the first safety edge that we saw. What I tend to do when I'm working on a curved piece is use a hammer like this. This is an old escutcheon hammer that a bricklayer would use, where I've cut the teeth out of here and just filed the edges round. Makes it easier for going in to the inner edge of the material without marking it at all. It can be done with the other one. In fact, I'll start it off with that one just to show it, and then I'll go to this one just to speed the process along. Again, just to prove that you don't need specialist hammers, but they just help. So again, exactly as before, just go up to start your edge, going ever so slightly past the black mark that you've made already, about 1mm or so further, and I like to just start off with a strike at either end. Just helps me when I'm walking around to ensure I've ended up in the correct place where I want to be. And then just start walking your way along as before, rolling the piece, being careful to always be moving the piece of material, not striking the same place twice. Otherwise you can cause a bit of a problem for yourself. So just walk your way along. What tends to happen is the edges will go quite easily and the middle part will resist you because now it's pulling on this 90 degrees. What you can do is you can work that down further in the middle first. But what it's done now is it's pulled a lot of our curve out, so we're going to have to put that back in afterwards. And after this I'll show you another way that you can do this, that you can speed that bit of the process up and perhaps sometimes not even move it at all without the use of heat. But just for the time being, keep walking it along exactly as before. Take it to 90 degrees, just touch them back if you need to. Flip the work over and then start working the face back down. In even passes. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to the beak or the horn of the anvil, just so I can rest this surface here more snugly into it. Now on the horn here of the anvil, now typically these are often not faced, they can just be left as a lump of mild or just over mild steel, so they can get marred and sometimes you have to clean this back. There's a lot of evidence of my early days of learning how to do this. You don't tend to strike the surface so much now. And what we do is offer it up, lift it ever so slightly off and work the end of this piece here, trying to avoid driving the hammer into the beak here, which is what you can see all the scarring from. And again, just gently work your way along. Pay careful attention to the end to make sure that they're going into the same place as the rest of the piece and not drifting off or becoming too big or flared. If they are becoming a bit large, just work more towards the end of them there and then bring them over and keep them tidy. And just keep working your way around. Until you're satisfied it's just about there. And then using the larger faced hammer again, just to make life easy on yourself, planish it back. Gentle, even strokes. Then that's ready for a clean and we can compare it to the other one. So we are back at the workbench. This is the first one that we turned over, quite straightforward, nice and flat. This was the curved piece that we did before, sorry, we did just now there, and you can see the curve is perhaps a little shallower here. So what you do is gently take it back to the anvil face, offer it up and tap it back down that way, and that'll crush it back down to the size that you want it to be. You must go steady and be sure to keep that nice even curve throughout the piece. Here you can see we successfully rolled the edge. It's quite straightforward, there's nothing to it, a little bit of a clean and we're done. So on the last curved piece I mentioned that I would show a way of stretching this material here so it doesn't resist being taken over the edge quite as much as it would, because you're pulling it in two directions, the right angle that you're putting in here at the end and also this curve, so you're really pulling the material in every direction possible. Something I forgot to mention, which is always good to do, is just to measure the width of your curve here from point to point, and that at the moment is 6 centimeters, 60 mil. Just because when you're finished you can tap it back into that place quite easily, so remember that there, 6 centimeters. What I do sometimes is just write it in there if I'm working on a piece for a long time. It just means that when you come back to it you don't have to remember exactly what you were doing, or have I moved it, haven't I moved it, and it's the 6 centimeters where it should be now, where I'm going to take it back to. So I take this scutcheon hammer that I moved around before, just 'cause it's got this nice curved edge, and what I've done is I've put one quite sharp curve in on this side and a shallower, flatter curve in there. And all I do through this middle portion here is just hit it a few times So I'm using gentle, even strokes throughout. Don't worry too much about the ends because they're not moving too far. What I've done is I'm breaking down this material a little bit, making it easier for it to move. It's not going to resist me quite so much, but it does have the disadvantage of thinning the material slightly and also creating a little bit of a thinning the material slightly here and creating a slightly more jagged edge here than perhaps we'd like to do. So what I tend to do now is just give that a quick touch, or take it to the 90 degrees and give it a quick touch on a grinder or with a file just to tidy that up. So we'll push the edge over exactly as before, starting in the corners just past the black mark on the work. And then we just walk our way along exactly the same as before. You see how much easier this middle piece is moving now. So I use the flatter edge now on here just to get that a bit sharper and a bit crisper. So now we're done there, and we can see we've got ever so slightly a little jagged edge on there. To be honest, it's not an awful lot, because I've done this a few times. I haven't gone mad, but sometimes you can go a bit heavy-handed in here, and you can really thin that material down. And all you do is just take a file and just take it back gently. You can use a machine for that, or just use a normal file. So you just tidy it up. With a few passes there, just be satisfied that it's as even as you want it. Take the slightly flatter hammer now because I want to work that over. And as before, rest it in against your hip or against the face of the anvil and tap that back. And then make your way to the beak or the horn of the anvil just to turn that over. And exactly as before, just keep it off the face of the anvil and tap it back. Once you're satisfied it's all but over, just give it a strike down with a broader hammer, making sure that you don't go up towards the larger end here, because all you're going to do is flatten the material. Always keep it about 2/3 the size of the piece you're doing and walk your way around. What I'm doing here is just checking to see if this is closed, and you can see just there it's not closed yet really, it's still open a bit, so I want to tap that down for neatness. There we go, I'm satisfied with that, happy with that. So we'll give that a quick go on the polisher and we'll compare it to the other two. I forgot at the end, because we checked before, this was 6 centimeters or 60 mil. So we can check here again and we can see that it's not moved at all. It's still exactly on 6 centimeters there. So when you break down that edge it works really well. In fact, on larger pieces where you've got to do that, perhaps at the end of a placket or on the ribs on the sides of breastplates and so on, it's absolutely crucial that you break down that material first. Otherwise it can become very difficult. So our first safety edge, the flat one we did there, just to see if we can do it, put things over. You can see it broadens the material up quite nicely there. It can be kept nice and tidy with relative little effort. Our next one would be something typically seen at the top edge of a greave or a van brace. Nice and straightforward, nice thickness to the material there, and good and safe. Obviously you'd round all these edges off and sort that out dependent upon the piece of equipment that you're making. And the third and final one, the same really as its predecessor, but just a slightly different technique to make things a little bit simpler as you push it over there. A little bit of a couple of dinks or dents on the material just here. Along there, but you see those all through the period pieces, and a little bit more care with the filing that I did rather than just a hurried job for the video would have soon seen that sorted. So I think you'll agree with me, a fairly straightforward thing to do. It tidies up armour nicely, it protects the wearer, and just generally is a technique that you see all through the medieval period,